Hey everybody, welcome back to Comedian MTG, or if this is your first video on this channel, welcome in for the first time. Today I'm going to be talking about something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about the Riftbound, the League of Legends trading card game. I actually got a chance to play Riftbound when I went to PAX East. I actually tried recording this video a couple weeks ago, but my audio got super corrupted, sadly. But we're back here and we're going to be talking about Riftbound and talking about why it should appeal to my general audience because I had a ton of fun with this game. So, for those who don't know, when I go out to a lot of events, when I go out to different things like PAX or Gen Con, I love trying different games apart from Magic, which is what most people know me for. But Riftbound was definitely the first game in a really long time that caught me off guard in such a pleasant way. I really, really enjoyed playing Riftbound, and I think it appeals to the majority of my audience, which are people who really enjoy competitive Commander, as in competitive multiplayer Magic. And so Riftbound really has a lot of the things that appeal while being something so unique and different and really interesting. Now, you're going to see my editor throw in a few clips of our gameplay while we were there playing, but let's talk about Riftbound and some of the things that make it really interesting. So, it has a really unique mana system that I think, sort of fixes the variance that other games have, right? You basically get two runes every turn. It also has a balancing mechanic for whether you're going first in a multiplayer pod or going last in a multiplayer pod. You have champions in your deck. Your main champion is the leader of your deck, and you have champions from League of Legends in your deck as well as the main champion. That gives you sort of this like emblem effect that you have access to consistently, and you do also get access to your champion as well, which is pretty interesting. I got to play Jinx in the demo, which was a really cool like discard matters deck. So you would get extra cards in hand if you started very low in hand size at the start of your turn, which really encourage you to like dump your hand, play really aggressively, and fight over your bases appropriately. Now, one of the main reasons that I want to talk about this on this very channel is one, Riftbound was insanely fun, and it's definitely something I could see myself making content for in the future moving forward. And two is competitive multiplayer is sort of part of the design early on. Now, competitive multiplayer in a tournament setting is not yet supported by the team. The initial plan to roll out Riftbound was 1v1 and 2v2, which I think is really interesting. But because 2v2 was part of the design, multiplayer was part of the initial design, and free for all multiplayer was also part of the design. Now, when I was talking to one of the lead designers at PAX, he had mentioned that one thing that's really important to him is the community and the community desires of this game. And the really cool thing is they've already completely changed the art style of this game. They had an original version back when it was called Project K, and it had this art style that the community wasn't a big fan of. And there was enough community outreach about it that they straight up changed the art style of the entire game. And so when I was talking to this lead designer, he said, our feedback is super important. So, yes, we had not initially desired to have competitive multiplayer as a supported tournament format, but if the community responds well enough, yeah, we absolutely are willing to do that. And to me, that was such a green flag, especially when this game is still, on the ground floor, still ready to sort of get out there and become this brand new cool thing. So, hypothetically speaking, if there's enough positive support for it, there could really be this audience that comes in from, CEDH, which is a competitive free for all multiplayer for Magic, if you're coming in as a league audience person. And now we can push it so that we're enjoying a free for all multiplayer version of Riftbound. And it could be a game that, has that aspect as a design part of the initial concept, right? As I mentioned, the balance around the multiplayer aspect is part of the initial design, right? So it's a game that basically has this multiplayer format baked into the initial core of it. Now, with all that being said, let's talk about some of the really cool stuff that goes into this game. As I mentioned, they have a balance mechanic for multiplayer, which I thought was really fascinating, really cool to watch, and it worked out really well. It also has ways, as I mentioned, to balance who goes first, who goes last. It's also a system in which player elimination isn't necessary. Basically, you as a player versus your opponents, you're fighting over three bases that are across the board state. And the first time you take a base during your turn, you gain a point. You actually win the game if you hit 8 points. So it's not like you're actually eliminating other players. You're not like attacking their life total by any means. Instead, you're trying to accrue more resources and gain more points as the game goes on. And what's really interesting about that is, yes, you are fighting other players for positioning, for where they are in their respective bases, all that stuff. But what you're not doing is taking players out of the game, right? So you can still have this competition. You can still team up with your opponents. You can still choose the right moments to interact with what your opponents are doing, to interact with what you're doing. You can choose to go fully in and develop a very aggressive game plan. You can choose to play a game plan that goes over the top of what your opponents are doing as the game goes on. There's a lot of creativity in it already with all of this dynamic gameplay that, as I mentioned, we only saw in this first rendition, which was just the starter decks. It was also pretty easy to pick up at the same time. So if you're someone who's watching this video and you're coming in from more of a League of Legends audience, or you're maybe a newer Magic player, or you're maybe new to card games in general, trading card games, the Riftbound game is not that hard to pick up. It was pretty easy to grasp right away, and it wasn't long. Basically, we played 2 games of multiplayer, and halfway through the first game, all of us kind of got the flow of the game, and suddenly it became less about are we understanding the mechanics of the game correctly, and more so are we playing our strategy correctly in these decks that we've just picked up for the first time. And it ended up creating some really swingy, captivating games. It even has a really interesting balancing mechanic for how you actually win the game. It's not just taking that last base, but it's either you take and hold a base for an entire turn rotation, or you take all 3 of the bases available in your turn. So it was a really cool way of balancing the game so it doesn't really feel like the first person to have a little bit of tempo in their favor just wins. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff, a lot of really cool stuff. So I found the balancing nature of the game to be really interesting. I found the gameplay to be really, really entertaining, even though we were doing a pretty basic version of the game with just the starter decks. And, for those who, like me, played a lot of League when they were younger, it's really cool to see all these legends that I used to spend hours and hours and hours grinding and maxing out. And now they're going to have these really sweet card forms. There was really interesting legends to start off. We played a Jinx deck, a Yasuo deck, a Volibear, and a Victor deck, which were all really unique. They have different play styles. Most of the decks seem to be like 2 of 6 available colors, which is really interesting. And they're sort of distinct from other ones that have existed in the past. Green's like this cruel control color, purple's the chaos color, stuff like that. They each had 6 unique colors. Each of them have their own sort of design space, and the pre-constructed decks were 2 colors each. So for example, when I played Jinx, she was red and purple, red being kind of an aggressive color like in other games, but purple being much more of the chaos color. So a lot more random, but also very powerful effects. There's also green is like the control color in this game. There's a lot of really cool, unique stuff as far as the color pie that they seem to be establishing pretty early in the game. And as I mentioned, being able to see some pretty sweet league characters as the legends in your deck was really interesting. It's also cool because the legend who is the character for your deck, you do have, and you can have multiple copies of, but if you send them out into battle and something happens to them, they actually go into your graveyard, which is pretty interesting. Or trash, I believe they call it in the game. But either way, it was a really, really fun game. I found the balancing mechanic to be really interesting. There's sort of this initial hump you have to get into because there are, as I mentioned, a set amount of resources you get as the turns go on. But part of the mechanic is that some cards are so powerful, they actually make you blow up your own resources or runes. So there was a really interesting mechanic there with the card design and how it almost self-balanced. You could have these super swingy, powerful effects, but it wasn't just like when you hit the maximum amount of mana sources, you were just done with that. Because as I mentioned, you are blowing up some of your own resources to gain either temporary or long-term value. So there was a lot of really interesting stuff with the mana system. As I mentioned, being able to play some of these iconic characters from League was really, really awesome. And genuinely, I try a lot of card games at these events. And I don't think I've gelled with a game as immediately as I've gelled with this one. Now, I know the game is, I believe, out in China already, and it will be coming soon this year. There's a really cool introduction video that's up here on the website, which I'll leave in the link down below. But yeah, I genuinely, this isn't like a sponsored post or anything. This is just me trying a game that genuinely impressed me quite a lot. And my hope is by making this video that if folks who are interested in coming from a competitive multiplayer setting find out that they actually really enjoy this Riftbound game, that we can, as a community, maybe push to have that as a competitive supported format, which would be a really, really cool thing. for a game that seems to have, as I mentioned, that multiplayer aspect, that multiplayer design baked into the original inception. So I think there's some really, really interesting design space coming up with this game. I think it's going to really, really appeal to many players who, for example, come from this channel who like competitive multiplayer Magic. And so there's a lot of really, really sweet stuff that this game has in store. And I'm genuinely really excited for it. I remember thinking to myself at the end of the demo, oh my gosh, when can I get some of these starter decks? Because I'm so ready to jump in head first. This game seems really, really fun. And I definitely know that I'll be sleeving up a deck of my own pretty soon. So really excited to see more of this Riftbound game. And let me know in the comments down below if y'all want to see me occasionally throw up some content here for Riftbound. I think it's going to be a really, really exciting game. And I'm excited to see the potential. And hopefully, we can get enough support, as I mentioned, to have competitive multiplayer Riftbound become a thing. And might be a really cool place to see a new game designed from the ground up with that respect. Thank you all for watching this video. Curious to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Catch you next time. Peace.